The train slid into the station with a low sigh, like it too was tired of traveling. When the doors opened, the old man stayed seated for a moment, watching the faint steam curl along the platform. He could already smell the air of the city, dust and old rain, a scent that never fully leaves. He hadn't been here in 40 years. 40 years since he'd last walked these streets, back when everything seemed larger, louder, closer to the heart. He stood, his knees stiff but steady, and stepped out into the hum of the platform. The city hadn't changed in the ways that mattered. The sound was still there, the quiet rhythm beneath everything. The shuffle of shoes, the far-off hum of a tram. Somewhere, a voice calling someone's name, fading before he could catch it. He walked slowly through the station gates. The tiled walls had lost their shine, but the pattern was the same. The tiny blue diamonds he used to trace with his finger while waiting for trains that never came on time. Outside, the late afternoon light rested gently on the buildings. The air was cooler than he remembered, and the trees lining the street had grown tall enough to brush against the hanging wires. He paused at the corner, looking down the long stretch of road that led into the older part of town. He still knew every turn, or thought he did. His hand went to his pocket, the folded paper map he'd brought with him, drawn by his younger self in a different lifetime. He unfolded it, smoothing the creases, and smiled faintly at the handwriting in the corner. The heart of everything. Half the street names were gone now, swallowed by time. But he didn't need them. His feet seemed to remember the way on their own. He passed the little bookshop that used to sit near the square. Except now, it was a cafe, all glass and soft yellow lights. Through the window, he could see a shelf that looked oddly familiar. The same wood, maybe even the same nail in the corner. He smiled. The city had changed clothes, but its body was the same. A gust of wind passed, carrying with it the scent of baked bread. He stopped. That smell, warm, faintly sweet, pulled him backward in time so suddenly that his eyes stung. There had been a bakery there once. The owner's son, a boy with curly hair, used to sneak him the burnt ends of loaves when no one was looking. The bakery was gone, of course, but for a brief second he could hear laughter spilling from an empty doorway. He stood there until the wind shifted and the sound faded done. He walked on. Somewhere deep inside, a part of him began to loosen, as if memory itself was breathing again. Asterisk, he took the long way through the narrow streets, the ones that used to wind between small shops and quiet doorways. The city had grown around them, but in these pockets, time still moved softly. He stopped by a corner where ivy crawled up the wall, half covering a cracked sign. He used to meet his friends here after work. The building behind the sign had once been a tailor's shop. He could still picture the way the man would whistle as he measured fabric, the smell of pressed cotton filling the air. Now, the windows were dark, but if he closed his eyes, he could almost hear the scissors snipping, the hum of the sewing machine, the faint clink of buttons rolling across the counter. He smiled faintly, not sure whether it was the sound or the silence that hurt more. Down the next street stood an old iron gate leading into a park. The paint had long faded, but when he pushed it open, the creak was the same as it had always been, long, low, and tired. The grass had grown wild in places, and the benches looked older than he did. But the air was still filled with that same soft hum of evening children's laughter far away, the rustle of leaves, a pigeon cooing from the fountain. He sat on one of the benches, the one near the fountain's edge. For a while, he just listened. He remembered sitting there once, 40 years ago, next to someone whose name he hadn't said in decades. She had been sketching in a small notebook, her hair tucked behind her ear, eyes half lost in thought. He had said something about how the world looked softer in her drawings, and she had laughed, that quiet laugh that always sounded like it belonged to the wind. He'd thought of writing to her once, then he hadn't, and time had filled the silence between them now. As he watched the ripples in the fountain, he could almost see her reflection beside his own faint, blurred but there. A leaf drifted across the surface, breaking the image apart. He sat there until the lamps flickered on, casting soft circles of light across the path. When he stood, his legs trembled a little, but his heart felt lighter. He took out the old map again, tracing the lines with his thumb. There was one place left he wanted to see before night settled, the small apartment near the edge of the old district, the one with a balcony that faced the river. He folded the map, tucked it into his coat pocket, and started walking. The streets grew quieter. The air held that faint chill that always comes before night, and somewhere, as he walked, the faintest sound reached him, like someone softly humming an old tune from a window above. He stopped, looking up. The window was empty, but for a moment, it felt like the city was singing to him, quietly, shyly, as if remembering to. The road to the river ran downhill, lined with buildings that leaned toward each other like old friends sharing secrets. He walked slowly, one hand brushing the walls as he passed rough plaster, cool stone, a texture that seemed to carry faint warmth from years of sunlight. The city lights began to bloom. One by one, soft yellow pools in the deepening blue. A tram clattered in the distance, the sound echoing against the hills. He followed that sound like a heartbeat. The air grew damp as he neared the river. He could smell it before he saw it, that mix of iron, moss, and rain. and then it appeared, wide and quiet. The water catching the last colors of dusk. He stopped at the railing, resting both hands on the cold metal. For a while, he just stood there, breathing. The river had always been his measure of time. When he was young, he'd walk along it after work, counting the lights reflected in the water. Each one had felt like a promise, something waiting ahead of him. Now, standing there 40 years later, he counted again. Fewer lights this time, but still enough. He turned toward the building that had once been home. It stood a few steps away, 3 stories tall, with pale walls that had turned the color of old paper. The balcony on the second floor was still there, a thin railing, a single clay pot on the edge, cracked but unbroken. He smiled. He remembered painting that railing one summer, his hands stained with blue paint for days. The landlady had brought him lemonade while he worked, scolding him for not wearing gloves. The main door was open. A small light glowed in the stairwell. He hesitated, then stepped inside. The air smelled faintly of soap and dust. Someone lived here now. He could hear the hum of a kettle somewhere above. But as he climbed the stairs, the sound faded, replaced by something softer. The second-floor landing looked almost the same. Same uneven tiles, same hairline crack along the wall. He reached out and touched the doorknob. It turned easily. The room inside was empty. No furniture, no curtains, just pale walls and that quiet, weightless air of places that have been loved once and left alone. He walked to the balcony and stepped out. The railing was cool beneath his hand. From here, the river stretched wide and silent. The lights trembled across its surface like drifting thoughts. He leaned forward slightly, resting his elbows on the rail. A memory came, not as a picture, but as a feeling. The warmth of another shoulder beside his. A voice saying, "Don't forget this view. It'll always be here." He closed his eyes. For a moment, the sounds returned. Laughter, footsteps in the hall. The soft clink of a cup set on the windowsill. But when he opened his eyes again, the room behind him was still empty. He smiled anyway. Some places don't forget. They just wait quietly until someone remembers them back into being. The river wind rose again, cool and steady. It carried the faint smell of rain. He stayed there a long time, until the lights across the water blurred and the night deepened into that soft, familiar stillness. The kind that feels almost like home. Almost like home. The night thickened slowly. The kind that seemed to hum instead of move. From the balcony, the river looked half asleep, a silver line breathing under the dim streetlights. He stayed there a while, until his hands began to feel the chill. When he stepped back into the stairwell, the sound of his shoes echoed softly a hollow, gentle sound that followed him down each step. Outside, the air had cooled enough to make his breath visible. He decided to walk. The streets near the river were nearly empty now. The cafes had shut their doors, chairs stacked inside, windows reflecting nothing but streetlight. Somewhere, a cat moved through an alley. There used to be a market here. He remembered the smell of oranges, the bright noise of bargaining, the clatter of scales. Now, it was just stillness and light. A few benches, a rusted fountain that no longer worked. He sat down. For a while, he watched the fog begin to gather above the river, sliding between the lamps like thin silk. It made the city look soft, like a dream trying to remember itself. He pulled the map from his coat pocket again. The paper felt fragile, thinner than he remembered. The lines looked faded, the ink almost gone in some places. But when he traced one of the streets with his finger, the paper seemed to pulse faintly, as if the line wanted to be remembered. He closed his eyes, whispering the name of the street aloud, and when he opened them, he noticed something small. A light had appeared in one of the distant buildings. The same street he'd just traced. He watched it flicker. Maybe someone had simply turned on a lamp. Maybe not. The map trembled in his hands as the fog moved across the square. And then, for the briefest moment, he thought he saw someone walking toward him, a silhouette in the mist, slow, steady, familiar. He blinked. The shape faded, leaving only the night. He smiled faintly, whispering, "I'm still here." The fog seemed to answer, curling around him softly before drifting away. He leaned back against the bench, letting the quiet settle in. The city didn't feel like it was built of stone anymore. It felt made of memory, living, breathing, waiting. He thought about how many nights must have passed like this, unseen, unnoticed. How many people had crossed these same streets, each leaving behind tiny traces of warmth, laughter, grief. Maybe the city remembered all of it. Maybe that's why it never truly slept. The clock tower struck once, a single low note rolling through the air. He smiled again, barely awake, his eyes heavy. The sound faded slowly, like time stretching thin. And then, somewhere deep within the fog, he thought he heard footsteps, not approaching, not leaving, just there, walking beside him through the years that had never really gone. He didn't turn to look. He didn't need to. He closed his eyes, letting the sound carry him through the square, past the river, back into the heart of the city that had never forgotten him. Asterisk, the first light of morning came quietly, without ceremony. Just a slow, gray glow that softened the edges of everything. Rooftops, trees, the slow curve of the river. He woke to it like someone surfacing from a long dream. The fog had thinned. The air felt lighter. He sat for a while, still on the same bench, his coat gathered around him. His breath rose in small clouds, fading into the pale dawn. Across the square, a shopkeeper was unlocking his door. Somewhere, a bird began to sing, thin, hesitant notes that slowly found their melody. The city was stirring again. He stood, stretching carefully. His legs ached, but it was the kind of ache that comes from being full, not empty. As he started walking, he noticed how the light fell on the buildings, soft, forgiving. It painted everything with a kind of mercy. He passed by a small cafe that hadn't been there before. In the window, a woman arranged flowers in a vase, humming faintly. He stopped, watching her for a moment. The tune was old, familiar, the same melody he thought he'd heard in the fog dot when she looked up. She smiled politely, just a stranger's kindness, and he nodded back. But as he walked away, the tune lingered behind him, trailing like a memory half awake. He reached the bridge soon after. The water moved lazily beneath it, catching pieces of sunlight that broke into slow ripples. He leaned on the railing again, watching. Everything felt different now, not newer, just more alive. He thought about all the places he'd visited, the park, the old apartment, the corners of streets that had once held laughter. None of them had truly disappeared. They'd just been waiting for someone to look at them again. He took out the map one last time. The paper was nearly blank now. The lines faded until only faint impressions remained, like the trace of something erased gently. He smiled. It didn't matter anymore. He didn't need the map. He was already where he was meant to be. He folded it carefully, slipping it into his coat pocket. Then he looked out over the river, where the light kept moving and the city breathed beneath it. Slow, calm, endless, he whispered, almost to himself. You remembered me, after all. The wind moved softly through the trees, as if answering, and for a long while he stayed there, watching the day unfold, listening to the quiet rhythm of a city waking up, and letting the years settle gently inside him, like dust caught in morning light. Asterisk, by the time evening returned, the light had changed again. It wasn't golden, not quite blue, somewhere in between, the color of quiet. He walked slower now, letting the air move around him, warm with the smell of food and faint laughter from open windows. The city felt awake, but not loud. It breathed around him, steady, alive, gentle. He found himself back near the park, the same gate, still creaking softly. He stepped inside. The fountain shimmered faintly in the dim light, a few drops still falling into the shallow pool below. He sat on the same bench as before. Everything seemed softer now. The benches, the trees, the sound of footsteps somewhere in the distance. He thought of all the things that had changed and all the things that hadn't. He realized, after all these hours of walking, that he hadn't come back to see the city. He had come back so the city could see him, for it to know he'd kept it inside him all these years, in half-remembered songs, in the smell of rain on concrete, in the silence that fills long afternoons. The wind brushed against his sleeve. Like a small nod of understanding, he leaned back, looking up at the first streetlight flickering to life above the gate. The same light he used to wait under, back when time moved slower and the night always seemed longer than it was. A few children's voices floated from far away, fading as the evening deepened. He smiled. The sound made something inside him unclench. He stayed until the sky turned that deep, velvety blue, the kind that feels like an old photograph you've held on to too long. And as the first stars appeared above the rooftops, he whispered a quiet goodnight, not to anyone in particular, just to everything, to the streets that still remembered his footsteps, to the windows that once held light, to the city that had waited long enough for him to return. He rose slowly, the night wrapping around him like an old coat. Then, with that small, peaceful weight in his chest, the kind that feels like both farewell and home, he walked down the quiet street until the sound of his steps blended with the rhythm of the city, and the city once again fell softly into sleep, into sleep.